You're good.
Well, yeah, I got my foot on. All right, we'll get rolling. Sorry, folks, if you might be watching live, we had some technical issues,
Not really. I was late.
and the technical issue was that somebody else, our tech support didn't show up on time.
Our tech support.
I never thought I'd be calling Tim Alton tech support, but he has surprised me over the years with his technical knowledge and his ability. Anyway, we'll start off real quickly with prayer requests. Remember me Wednesday, I gotta go in for a biopsy and a scope, and I don't know what the results of that will be or what I'll find out from it. And when I do find out, whatever decision that I will be facing might be difficult or might be easy. I don't know. So just pray that all that'll pan out in a positive way. Anybody else have anybody they want to mention this morning before we get started?
I got to start over all my medical stuff here at the VA here soon, so I'm going to be going in for a scope and a biopsy also, and
Really?
some more sleep tests here soon. So from that,
Yeah, he's got to have surgery. What, July the 9th?
July 9th. Yeah.
What?
It's just for the scope and biopsy for my throat.
Okay.
So
We'll certainly remember that. Remember Cohen? He has had double ear infection, and most likely he's going to need tubes put in his ear. He's having these ear infections, and he's allergic to penicillin, and he had a reaction to the last antibiotic, and they rather than just keep throwing him on antibiotics, they need to fix the problem. And so pray that that will get fixed and taken care of. Anybody?
In your prayers, he's either having problems with his gallbladder or something. Had this for a while, but I'm not sure what's happening.
These old models, they just start, like the carburetor starts messing up and the transmission starts falling apart.
But at least we know the very worst thing that can happen.
At least we know what.
The very worst thing that can happen.
Right.
The way the world's going, might
Quits
be the
running.
very worst thing that happened. Might be the very
Quits
best thing
running.
that happened.
Yep, that's right.
My mom.
Well, if we hold on to 2030, they're gonna create the technology where they can take your soul out of one body and put it in a younger body and just keep living on forever. So,
you watch too many movies.
yeah, just hang in there, brother.
Amen.
Anybody else? Tim, would you please?
Yeah. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you once again for the chance to come and study your word rightly divided. Lord, we pray for all these prayer requests, Lord, that you'll take care of each need according to thy will. And we pray, Lord, that you be with Stacy this morning, Lord, that you give him the word the hearts need to hear to build us up in the word of your grace. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Something that, let's go to Mark chapter 14 and verse 37. And this is the Lord in the Garden of Gethsemane. He was just before they were coming to, he was to be betrayed, and he knew that his time had come, that he would be crucified real soon. And he had the other apostles were with him, and he was telling them to watch with him and to stay awake. And he goes and he prays and he comes back and he finds them asleep. And he makes this statement. He says, "And he cometh and findeth them sleeping, and saith unto Peter, Simon, that sleepest thou? Couldst not thou watch an hour? Watch ye and pray, lest ye enter into temptation. The spirit truly is ready, but the flesh is weak." You know that
Where are
when
you?
Mark chapter 14, verse 37. And again, he went away and prayed and spake the same words. And when he returned, he found them asleep again, for their eyes were heavy, neither wist they what to answer him. Now, how many of you in here been so sleepy that you fell asleep with the eyes open, or you just could not stay awake? I mean, we've all dealt. And you think about these bodies, we kind of joke around, but our bodies have such limitations. The flesh, your spirit, the essential man inside your spirit has no drawbacks. It's full of energy. It's the flesh that drags us down. And and the Lord was bringing that point out. A lot of times we think we can take on the world, but this flesh gives out. And if fatigue doesn't set in, then we just have the limitations that they fall apart. And we're all, some of the elders here in this class could testify to that very fact. But the point that I wanted to see here, there was something, the other aspect of that is something major was going on right there in that garden at that moment. And they were asleep. They were asleep, and a major battle, spiritual battle was transpiring in their presence, and they couldn't stay awake. And that's something else that I just kind of want to look at. The world, the way I look at it, the world is designed to exhaust you. It's designed to break you down. Not only do we just have the normal, natural limitations of our physical body, but the world jacks up a system to suck you in, just to suck the life out of you. Whip you, beat you down. The fast lane. And when you're young, and I'm seeing this in a lot of young people, that, they do have a lot more energy, they have a lot more veracity, and they can do, and they get to the point they think, man, I can do it all. I can multitask, and I can stay up late and party and whatever. But it doesn't take long before they start to realize, I can't do it all. But the flesh is weak when it comes to important things in the spiritual realm. All right, what I want to do is us to look at this idea of sleep, because, the Bible, when it talks about light and darkness, there are spiritual lessons that it's trying to teach us. And there's many lessons related to sleep and being awake in the Word of God. So we want to look at some of those. Let's go to Proverbs chapter 19 and verse 15. Something else, about sleep, and it's a necessary thing. I find that as I've gotten older, I don't sleep as well as I used to. I used to could sleep like a baby. I mean, literally lay my head down and just fall asleep throughout the night and wake up refreshed and energized. Now I wake up 2, 3, 4 times a night, going to the bathroom, and go ahead.
Welcome to old manism.
Yeah, I know. You would think that, now I always used to wonder this about her and my grandparents. If you've ever noticed people that are like in their 70s and 80s, you look at them, they're asleep over there. Like we'd go for Christmas, and look there, and after we'd had dinner, Grandpa would be asleep over there, nodding off. And I thought, man, why is he nodding off? And it's just the fact, partly because as you get older, you don't sleep as well, I don't think.
That's a fact.
But anyway, when you are asleep, you're unconscious of what's going on around you. How many of you ever watched some of those videos where they've done that slow action photography of somebody above in a bed, and they're just constantly moving around, throughout the night? Now they don't realize that they're all over that bed. They're not conscious of what's going on around them. And I think that's what the Word of God is trying to get us to see where sleep is concerned. We're not awake, we're not sober, we're not aware of what's going on around us. Notice here in verse 15, slothfulness casteth into a deep sleep, and an idle soul shall suffer hunger. How many people know, I see a lot of people that walk the streets, and throughout my years of being a driver, and I've seen a lot of people, and you go, especially those that were fooling around with drugs or just was whatever. I'd show up to make a delivery, knock on the door at like 12 o'clock in the afternoon and beat on the door, and they come to the door, and I thought, man, this guy's been asleep all day, I mean, what is he doing? And they're living on the government and all that slothfulness.
Yeah.
leads to, well, you can suffer hunger if you don't get up and get with it, you know. He that keepeth the commandment keepeth his own soul, but he that despiseth his way shall die. And what he's saying here is in a spiritual sense where the commandments of God were concerned, was to be aware, to be awake, keep that commandment, to be a sober about it. And he that despiseth his ways, meaning the Lord's way, shall die. Proverbs chapter 6 and verse 4. Now, obviously, we need sleep, and he's really not talking about physical sleep here, because we need rest.
Yep.
He's saying, give not sleep to thine eyes, nor slumber to thine eyelids. Deliver thyself as a roe from the hand of the hunter, and as a bird from the hand of the fowler. I believe it was Peter that said that our adversary is as a roaring lion who seeketh to devour you. Okay, if you were out in the wilderness and a lion or a tiger was hunting you, I doubt you'd be sleeping much. You try not to fall asleep because you didn't want the sucker to sneak up on you.
Exactly.
Okay? That's what he's saying here. Go to the ant, thou sluggard, consider her ways and be wise, which having no guide, overseer, or ruler, provideth her meat in the summer and gathereth her food in the harvest. How long wilt thou sleep, O sluggard? When wilt thou arise out of thy sleep? Yet a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to sleep. So shall thy poverty come as one that travaileth, and thy want as an armed man. Now that, I think he's literally talking about the man that won't work should not eat. I think that's the physical application here, but the spiritual application is to pay attention. In the age of grace, we need to know what we're supposed to be doing in the age of grace. We need to know who our apostle is. We need to know what he's trying to teach us so we can compare it to what every Joe Blow and the brothers out there trying to pull over on us out there, so that we won't be cast to and fro. And let's go to Luke chapter 12 and verse 15. Now, I believe this is all done for a reason. This world system that we live in is done for a reason. I think generally it's to get you to buy into the fast lane living thing, right? And then it's to get you, when you're so overwhelmed by the emotions that comes from all the stress that comes in, then you just want to tune everything out, right? And so you don't want to listen to anything about God or the truth or just things like that. And he wants you to stay in that state of sleep so that when you die, you just fall off into hell. I think that's the main thrust of what Satan is trying to do, where this being awake and being asleep is concerned. Luke 12:15. And he said unto them, take heed and beware of covetousness, for a man's life consisteth not in the abundance of the things which he possesseth. And he spake a parable unto them, saying, the ground of a certain rich man brought forth plentifully. And he thought within himself, saying, what shall I do, because I have no room where to bestow my fruits? Now he could have taken some of those fruits and give it to other people that weren't as blessed as he was. And I think that's kind of the point that the Lord's trying to make here. But also this idea of just constantly consuming for ourselves, okay? And he said, this will I do, I will pull down my barns and build greater, and there I will bestow all my fruits and my goods. And I will say to my soul, soul, thou hast much goods laid up for many years. Take thine ease, eat, drink, and be merry. You know, hey, we all like to eat, drink, and be merry, and chill, and relax, and all of that. But there's something else going on in the spirit realm that we must be aware of. But God said unto him, thou fool, this night thy soul shall be required of thee. Then those shall things, then shall those things be which thou hast provided? And generally it'll go to people that'll waste those goods, that didn't know how to gain it. You know, they say that, this is true, you've got generations of a person gets rich and wealthy, and he has wealth, that passes that on to the children, and they squander it, so that generation goes without, and then the grandchildren say, oh, we're tired of living like this, and then they go and, you know, it's just a cycle. And that's the, you know, a physical aspect, but he's basically saying here to this individual, it looks as though this person was not saved. They were more focused on the physical realm, and they were lulled into this mindset of, hey, you know, this is how I live, and I'm going to gain and receive and spend, and then what if you die? And then the Lord says, what if a man gains the whole world and loses his own soul? What good is that? Let's go. Let's see. Let's go. Well, as a matter of fact, let's just go to that. Matthew chapter 16 and verse 26. That's one of them verses that's pretty clear. There's no real wondering what the importance of that. But what is a man profited if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul? And you know, I think about, and there have been many wealthy men, powerful men in my lifetime, that based on what they say, I know that they died as a lost individual, to the best of my knowledge. And they had all of this prestige, they had all of this media attention, and then they woke up in hell, most likely. What good is that, to have had all of that and then lose your soul? The soul is a very important, well, it's the most important thing that you have. And what shall a man give in exchange for his soul? And that's what Satan doesn't want humanity to come to grips with. How important is your soul? And what would you give in exchange for it? I think that's why the Lord talked a lot about those things while he was here. Paul says, knowing the terror of the Lord, we persuade men. It's important. Now let's go to Daniel chapter 12 and verse 2. Daniel 12 and verse 2. Now this is talking about the resurrection. And it's really interesting. We were talking about this, I think it was last week, sleeping in the Lord, sleeping in death, and the context of sleep. He says, Daniel says, and many of them that sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. And I think about at the great white throne, and it says that hell is emptied, and all those will be brought up. They will awake, in a sense, to the reality of standing before the Lord and go into everlasting contempt and shame. Okay? And those that are resurrected will be to everlasting life. So it's important. Now let's go to Acts chapter 20 and verse 7. I've used this verse, it always puzzled me, and I always thought this verse was really interesting, or passage rather. I've heard many preachers use this to beat people up with that might fall asleep while they're preaching. Acts 27. And upon the first day of the week, when the disciples came together to break bread, Paul preached unto them ready to depart on the morrow, and continued his speech until midnight. I don't know when they got started, but he was preaching a long time. And were many lights in the upper chamber, and where they were gathered together, and there sat in a window a certain man named Eutychus, being fallen into a deep sleep. And Paul was long preaching. And it sounds like the person that wrote this is like Paul was long preaching.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it was a good thing or a bad, well, obviously it's a good thing, but it still brings up the context of our ability. That's why a lot of times when we have these long Bible conferences, we take breaks because our minds will start to wander and it'll start to shut down and you can't focus on what's being said there. And it says, was long preaching, and he sunk down with sleep and fell down from the third loft and was taken up dead. And Paul went down and fell on him, embracing him, and said, trouble not yourselves, for his life is in him. Now, I don't know, I'll be honest with you, I don't know if they thought he was dead and Paul knew that he wasn't, and he said, no, he's okay, or he was dead, and Paul went over and had these miraculous gifts at the time, and his life came back into him. But when he therefore was come up again, and he had broken bread and eaten and talked a long while, even until day of break, so he departed, and they brought the young man alive, and were not a little comforted. And they were, I guess it's kind of like, so if something like that had happened here, if somebody had just collapsed and we thought they were dead, no pulse, and then we got up, and then that person sits down, and you'd be watching them for a little while to see if they really are okay, and I think that's what happened here. I don't know. I guess the point that I get from that is these things about dispensationalism, rightly divided, they're complicated, and your mind is weak, and it needs to be, like you was talking about, it gets cloudy. It needs to be things jarred up, stirred up in the mind, or we'll get lax. And I think that's kind of what is being taught here. When you're preaching, pay attention. Keep your head and your mind awake. All right, let's go now to Romans chapter 13 and verse 10. Romans 13:10. And Paul he reiterates this multiple times. He understood that we live in a world, one, that we're assaulted. Our flesh is assaulted day in and day out. Our spiritual man is assaulted day in and day out by the world system, by the system. Just the system itself is just trying to corrupt you as an individual, whether you're saved or not, right? Mm-hmm. And then if you are saved, it just tries to grind you down. And that there's a spiritual warfare that's going on that we either can participate in or we can just not participate in. And he reiterates the fact that we can be lulled to sleep. He says, love worketh no ill to his neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfilling of the law, and that knowing the time that now it is high time to awake out of sleep. For now is our salvation nearer than when we believed. And he said that 2,000 years ago. You think we might be a little closer than he was then? I think so. Yep. The night is far spent. The day is at hand. We sleep at night, don't we? It's time to wake up. The day is at hand. Let us therefore cast off the works of darkness, again, that world system, and let us put on the armor of light, which is, I believe, the Word of God in general, but specifically the dispensation of the grace of God, the gospel of Christ, all of that. Go ahead.
I remember me and Doug talking about these verses back years ago, and Doug made a good point, talking about people that preach this stuff, follow your dreams. And and Doug said, well, you think about it, people that are dreaming are asleep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't think there's anything wrong with having a pursuit of something good in life.
Right.
But, your dreams have to be realistic.
Well, right. Well, I've thought about this too. I've said here many times that I love And I've always been fascinated with biographies about famous people like Elvis and just all sorts of the whole spectrum of life. And those people always had a dream that they followed and finally accomplished that dream. And once they get it, like in Elvis's case, he accomplished this majestic dream, but people couldn't leave him alone. The fame, he couldn't take the fame. He'd have to rent out a whole movie theater just so he could enjoy the normal, where we could go in the movie theater. And that, he ends up dying in a pretty tragic way. And you look at their lives after they've accomplished that dream, it's not always very attractive, is it?
That's right.
Again, I'm not saying that, like you, that there's not things that we can have a goal per se, but that's a common phrase that's on American Idol too. Have you ever noticed? I'm living my dream.
Yeah.
This is my dream. I've been following this dream since I was a little kid.
To get it crushed by the judges.
Yeah. Oh, Lordy. All right, now let's go in light of this idea of being awake. The importance of being awake, okay, the spiritual aspect of it. There is a awesome story that illustrates this. Judges chapter 16 and verse 16. Samson was told by the Lord, this child, as long as he has his hair, he'll have unbelievable strength. Okay, don't cut his hair. Samson knew this. He knew that his strength supposedly resided in the fact of his hair. Okay, now I don't know what all that means, to be honest, but there's some real spiritual lessons here to be gleaned from this. And they have tried and tried to conquer him, and to no avail. And Delilah, and of course, obviously Samson loved women. He had evidently multiple of them, but Delilah seemed to be the one that was closest to his heart, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Delilah was used by the Philistines to gain access to the secret of Samson. And Samson finally broke down because she just went after him and went after him. He finally broke down and told her the truth. Okay? So verse 16, and it came to pass when she pressed him daily with her words and urged him, words like, well, if you really love me, you tell me this. You reveal your heart to me. We don't have secrets. That's the kind of stuff she told him.
That don't work at my house.
No, they don't. Because I am a strong man of God, and no one's going to break me down.
That's hilarious.
So that his soul was vexed unto death. So, and on the other side of this, but I guess a guy could do this, but when your wife or your significant other just nags the far out of you, finally just say, okay, I've had enough here. And that can go both ways.
That don't happen at my house either.
No, it don't happen. Okay. Okay, so he was vexed unto death, that he told her all his heart, and said unto her, there hath not come a razor upon my head, for I have been a Nazarite unto God from my mother's womb. If I be shaven, then my strength will go from me, and I shall become weak, and be like any other man. And when Delilah saw that he had told her all his heart, she sent and called for the lords of the Philistines, saying, come up this once. Now think how cold this is for her to do this. She knows what she's going to have to do. Came up unto her and brought money in their hands. So they show up with bags of money. And she made, and that, again, this goes back to that statement, for the love of money is the root of all evil. And there's some evil that's getting ready to take place. And so he tells her this. She sends word for the Philistines to come. But notice what happens here. She made him sleep upon her knees. She's like sitting there, and he's got his head laid on her lap, and she's probably rubbing his hair. speaking soft words, and he just goes, he feels safe, and he just falls asleep, right? And she called for a man, and she caused him to shave off the 7 locks of his head. So she knew she had to get him to fall asleep to do this unto him, right? Because no man could have held him down and done it. And she began to afflict him, and his strength went from him. And she said, the Philistines be upon thee, Samson. And he awoke out of his sleep and said, I will go out as other times and shake myself. So he got up like I had always done before, just went out and kicked butt, right? So he goes out thinking, I got this taken care of, but the Philistines overcame him. And it started to dawn on him what had happened. And put out his eyes and brought him down to Gaza and bound him with fetters of brass. And he did grind in the prison house. Pretty sad story. From one minute you're awake and have the strength, the next minute you're asleep and you're in prison. There's a lot of spiritual stuff going on here in this passage. And of course, they go on, says that they made sacrifice to their god Dagon, and they belittled him and made fun of him, and he was in shame and reproach. And let's see, verse 28. And Samson called unto the Lord and said, O Lord God, remember me, I pray thee, and strengthen me, I pray thee, only this once, O God, that I may be avenged of the Philistines for my 2 eyes. And of course, he took the 2 middle pillars and pushed them out and killed himself and all the Philistines that were there by his own death. It's a tragic story. I believe that really happened. You know, you read this kind of stuff and they say, that's a parable or whatever. I believe this really happened. Okay. But there's some great spiritual lessons there in that. Let's go now to Thessalonians chapter 1 Thessalonians 5:4 and Ephesians 5:8, and we'll finish up. 1 Thessalonians 5:4 and Ephesians 5:8. Okay, 1 Thessalonians 5:4. But ye, brethren, are not in darkness, that day should overtake you as a thief. Ye are all children of the light and children of the day. We are not of the night. Has anybody ever tried to sleep in a room that's not blocked off and the sun's coming in? And it's hard to sleep with, for me, I can't sleep hardly, unless I'm just totally exhausted, I can nap. But to sleep during the day, and I've talked to many people, one guy in particular that I've worked with, and he's been doing this for years, he comes in and he washes the trucks, and he does that at night, and he's told me many times that he's got off, gone home, went to bed, went to sleep, maybe sleep 2-3 hours, and couldn't go back to sleep and just felt like crap the rest of the day. And, we're not designed for that. Some people can do okay, but we're designed to sleep at night and be awake during the day. But let us watch and be sober, for they that sleep, sleep in the night, and they that be drunken are drunken in the night. And I can attest to that fact. Everybody last night that was at that Sunday's Marina, it was nighttime and they were drunken and having a good time. But let us who are of the day be sober, putting on the breastplate of faith and love, for in helmet the hope of salvation. And the idea here is, and it's reality. People are, if they're going to be drunken and partying, they're going to do that at nighttime for the most part. And that's the thing that he's trying to get across. Let us be awake spiritually in this context. Be awake, be sober in the daytime. Ephesians 5:8. For ye were sometimes darkness, but now ye are light in the Lord. Walk as children of the light. He's talking about walking in doctrine there, not being some great spiritual, I don't know, something that they would say would be walking in light. For the fruit of the Spirit is in all goodness and righteousness and truth, proving what is acceptable unto the Lord, and have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather reprove them. And the works of darkness would be anything that world system puts forth. Religion, whether it's religious or non-religious, it's constantly putting forth all sorts of ideas and doctrine contrary to the truth. For it is a shame even to speak of those things which are done of them in secret. But all things that are reproved are made manifest by the light. You know what I think about that being done in secret? E.C. Moore talked one time on one of his tapes. He said there was somebody that he had known, or he was visiting, or maybe was testifying to, or whatever, and this man took him into a little room that he had built. And in that room, he had candles, and he had built a little shrine. He was a Catholic, the guy was. And he had built him a little shrine in there, and he went in there and he would worship Jesus and Mary. And I remember E.C. talking about going in or looking into that room and being antsy, because what that man was doing in there was very ungodly, very bad. Now, most people would look at it and say, well, he's a devoted Catholic. That's a decent and good thing. But he understood what was going on in that little room. Idolatry, some bad spiritual stuff. And he said it made me very nervous. I wanted to get out of there. And I would too. I've been around some people that were very religious, and the vibe that they give off is spooky. Like you don't know what they're going to do, kind of thing. Wherefore he saith, awake thou that sleepest, and arise from the dead, and Christ shall give thee life. I think about, and I've mentioned this, and I know that I've told this to you about Hal Osborne being, this preacher was up on the stage preaching, and he stuck his head in that buck stove and come out and his hair was all smoking. That mentality of doing crazy stuff like that, you don't know what I'm saying? That's
a different spirit.
That's a different spirit right there, and it's spooky.
Yeah.
And I've been around people like that, and I'm usually fairly alert when I'm around people like that. Christ shall give thee light. See then that thou walkest circumspectly, not as fools, but as wise. So my point in all this is that the Bible has a lot to say about sleep and being awake. Most of the time when it's talking about that, it's talking about being mentally awake, spiritually awake to the things that's going on around us, and not being asleep. And also that our flesh is weak, and we have to take that into account when we're dealing with these spiritual matters. So hopefully, I hope you enjoyed that, and then it was a benefit to you this morning.
Good job. Good
Now
job.
we'll pass the serpents.
Do
I
what?
said, now we'll pass the serpents.
That's something right there that I wouldn't want to be nowhere near when something like that's going on.
Yeah. If I went somewhere and saw something like that, I'd be out of there quick.
My uncle told me just about that one time. He said there was this guy. He was at a snake handling church. I don't think he knew that it was a snake handling church. And then they brought out the snakes, and he said to one of the people there, he says, "Where's the back door?" And he says, "Well, we don't have one." He says, "Where do you want one?"
Yeah. It's easy for a person to see that that's false.
Right.
That's easy to see. you know, a religion that's caught up in handling snakes and drinking strychnine poison, to test their faith. It's easy to see that that's corrupt, you know. It's these things that are passed through the ear that sound good to the ear. Like, yeah, I know you're saved by grace, and I know it's a free gift, but you still gotta live a good life.
Right. And that sounds good.
It sounds
It
good.
sounds right.
It sounds right. But see, that's what where people ain't that's what people need to get awake to, like what you're talking
Right.
about there.
Well, I immediately think of that passage where there's a way that seemeth right to a man.
Yeah, you're gonna need to
Yep.
enter a lot, so I'm about to start back to college. I hope, hopefully that
You know,
brings me
something
a
else
little
just talking
focus.
about, do you remember the movie A Man Called Horse?
I do.
Okay,
Yeah.
remember how that in that Indian tribe to show their spiritual walk, they put
I
in
know, right?
things in their chest and they were withstanding physical testing and all of that.
Yeah.
And basically
Yeah.
breaking the flesh down.
College.
Yeah.
Open them out.
Before I joined the military, it was a very liberal
I
college.
look at the snake handling and the strychnine thing, and there are groups of people in this world that's what, in their mind, that's
A
what
lot more adults
spirituality
nowadays
is.
in college.
Mhm.
Like the Indians had that, and they were wrong. These people, even though they take somebody, took the word of God and twisted it so that they could do that doctrine, they feed off of that. Then there's those
I'm not
that's
reading
all
it yet.
about
This is
education,
I know, my doctor's
words,
but I don't know
well
that age
spoken.
right
There's
now.
also people like that.
Yeah.
It's like we say it all the time. Satan has a smorgasbord of it. They can feed every imagination,
Yep.
every part.
Yep. If you've thought it, the doctrine's out there
Yeah,
to entertain your ideas.
yeah, and maybe 3, 4 different variations of that.
Yep.
I've always thought about these guys that do these extreme sports, like a motorcycle and go 30 feet up the air. And they get a rush from that, and they do it even to their own demise. And people worship this guy.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm trying to get back.
And it's amazing.
My weight.
Yep.
That type of individual, and the people that appreciate that, they're the ones that I think that thinks,
Yeah, they had me on
if I,
provincial for almost a year.
if I fast for 6 weeks,
It's a.
Mhm.
and I've really accomplished something for God.
It's not quite as addictive.
And like you say, there's people that see the fallacy of that.
Yeah.
And,
I mean, I've been like this for
I've
years.
never been
Like, I remember it actually started at my first command back in 2007,
surprised
2008.
about all the
I started
stuff
noticing
that's out there.
weird. That this
That's
world
so
is
hard.
Oh, yeah.
God is
Yeah.
concerned. They thank God.
Where I was like,
Yeah.
I've been talking to somebody who wants this.
You know, you made me think about, when you was talking about being in the spiritual realm and people being blind to that and being in darkness and all that stuff. You made me think about, that part in Young Guns where they, drink that, peyote.
Yeah.
And they're riding through that Indian, tribe on their horses and old, what's his
I'll
name?
wake up multiple times during the night.
Emilio Estevez is riding backwards on his horse, and they're all still high on that, peyote. And one of them says,
I told
"Hey,
I had a dream the other
they
night.
can't see
I was
us.
dreaming.
We're in the spiritual world."
And I felt something weird.
You remember that part?
I
Screamed
do.
out,
But I always thought
and
that
all of
was
a sudden,
Well,
like,
here's
this
something
guy
else too,
weird.
we're still on.
Yeah.
That's fine.
And I woke up and I was like, oh crap.
I've given a lot of thought about
And
this.
my girl reached over and held me.
Those
Like,
chemicals
then I woke up again.
can open you up
I
to the
realized, I
spiritual
was like,
realm.
I'm alone.
And
So I
I've thought about this too. There's
my throat,
the people
it
that,
swells shut.
what is it,
Like
that they
they
see stuff,
it's
and
called,
they see, people
LSD.
hear voices,
Pretty much
they
an
hear,
allergic
these people
reaction
hear
thing.
voices and, it's just one of those things. I forget the name.
They've done it before, and they're gonna.
Manic depressive?
No.
No, it didn't
Are you
help.
talking about some psychological
Yeah, it's
problem?
psychological, like,
Bipolar?
crank up.
Well, that probably has something to do with it.
Yeah, exactly.
They call it bipolar.
Exactly.
I think it's
I guess
possession.
heals up.
Yeah, I do too.
When they hear these voices, cause they said, it's schizophrenia, that's what I'm thinking of, schizophrenia.
Schizophrenia.
This guy, they said this is, they wake up and they hear all these voices saying, you're no good, you're no good.
After that,
I think that's a demon.
Oh, yeah, I absolutely do.
But by the same token, these people, like, the Indians would take peyote and stuff, and these hallucinogens, I think it was more than just their brain chemistry, I think they were actually communing with demonic spirits
Yeah.
and stuff, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, the Native Americans were big time in idolatry.
And isn't it funny that there's a section here, well, like, he sees that as a legitimate.
Yeah, but they're
Why
spiritual.
should we judge them?
You know, that they were spiritual when they would talk about, the great spirit in the sky. They couldn't name him, they couldn't call him by name, the Lord Jesus Christ, the great spirit in the sky. You know what I'm saying? Well, there's a great spirit in the sky. He's in the second heaven. His name's Satan. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But there, you know, that's what he don't get. There is no other name under heaven by which a man can be saved than that which is Jesus Christ. You know, say his name.
I agree.
You know,
Right.
there's something about that name.
Well, and,
He was given a name above all names.
a lot of the religions, they talk about God, it's all about God rather than Jesus Christ.
Well, and you know, Paul talks about over in Romans chapter 1 about how they worship the creation more than the creator. You know, and that's the Native Americans big time. You know, and it's our world too. People that will worship, you know, the things that God's created. Like, you know, and I love to see an eagle, don't get me wrong, but the Native American, they worship those animals. You know, they seen spirits in those animals. You know what I'm saying?
And I believe that a prince of the power of the air, not necessarily Lucifer, but a prince,
Yeah.
convinced them, and they seen evidence through that. They saw visions that convinced them of that lie
Yeah.
and built a whole
There's like
religion.
anything in there.
Oh, yeah.
It just feels like that.
Good job, brother.
It hurts. And it's been doing that for years.
Good
now.
job.
So they're trying to figure it out, see if they can fix it. And